I'm Ryan Lightfoot-Brown of FundCalibre. Today we're joined by Jamie Jenkins, the elite rated manager of the BMO Responsible Global Equity Fund. Jamie, thank you very much for having us.
Pleasure.
Now, your fund, you've got a few constraints over where you can and can't invest and what sort of companies. One of these is around the environmental impact of some of your companies, particular around the Arctic. Can you just tell us a bit about what sort of thing this includes and excludes?
Absolutely. Well, this criteria that we use was actually slightly predates our current exclusions that we use. Because what we were trying to do with this criteria around Arctic and environmentally sensitive areas was to make sure that the companies we invest in minimize their impact on the environment. That criteria has actually, in a way, been superseded recently by our decision to divest fully from all fossil fuel companies. So many of the fossil fuel companies have had historical association with activities in the Arctic and such environmentally sensitive areas. So that's really the backdrop to it.
Okay. And one of the other things you look at is businesses with unsustainable practices. Can you just tell us what that means? Maybe give an example of it.
Absolutely. So we think about unsustainability in terms of both product and conduct. What is the service that these companies are providing, and how do they behave? And so if you think about the type of activities that we deem to be unsustainable, then by that we mean industries such as gambling, nuclear power generation, we think about weapons production, and of course fossil fuel, companies involved in fossil fuel exploration. So that's from the product side. And then from the conduct side, we think about how do companies behave? To what extent have they got a wider set of stakeholders' concerns involved in their business? And so here we're thinking about, if we think about social issues, we're thinking about health and safety, we're thinking about what kind of protocols and standards does a company employ to both protect its customers and its employees. Then from a company's perspective, what kind of staff training programs have they got? What kind of employee engagement programs have they got? So, we're looking for companies that are really looking beyond the P&L to making a positive contribution to a wider common good.
Okay. And sort of expanding on that a little bit, you look at companies that have got problems to be solved. Can you give us maybe an example of a company that had a problem and you've gone along and solved it, and perhaps one where the company hasn't done it and you've had to divest?
Sure. Well, an example of a company that is really providing a service that is addressing an enormous global challenge would be a company such as Xylem. Now, Xylem is a US industrial company that it's almost like a supermarket for water, water issues. It provides a whole wide range of products and services around the provision of water to both individuals and companies. I was only looking this week, there's over 2 billion people of the world population who do not have access to drinking water. And Xylem is one of these companies that, through its product range, is enabling both companies to treat water and also put in clean water infrastructure. And there's a big unmet need in emerging markets for new projects. And also there's a real refresh cycle required in developed countries such as the US and Europe, where we know infrastructure really needs a massive upgrade. So that would be an example of a company that we're doing a lot of engagement with, working with them to try and see how they can accelerate the access to water for the world's population.
And one of the key words that's picked up from your answer is engagement. You obviously, as part of your process, will go in and talk to companies about this sort of thing. Have you got an example of where you've gone in and helped a company improve its practices?
Yeah, well, this is something we do a lot of. Increasingly, companies, they tend to look at us almost as a kind of consultant, because we have a real reputation in this field. We've been doing engagement activities for over 30 years. And I know engagement's become very fashionable of late, but it's something that we've always believed really, really works. An example of a company recently that we just had here in the office was a Japanese company called Hoya. Now, Hoya is a well-run company. It is a high-quality business that typically we do like to invest in. But even good businesses can be better. And Japan is very good at many, many things, particularly this is a world leader in optical lenses for spectacles. And they also have some very, very advanced electro-optic businesses, particularly hard disk drives. They have a world monopoly for hard disk drives that go into HDDs. HDDs are going into servers. They're fueling the growth of cloud. So they have a really, really strong position. But one thing they haven't really thought about, particularly advancedly, is some of these ESG issues, environmental, social, and governance issues. And when we saw them the other day, we discovered that they're shortly to open up a new plant in Vietnam. Now, many companies are doing that, particularly in light of the US-China trade war. Vietnam is a very popular destination. But we asked them about their supply chain audit and how much they are self-auditing conditions in these factories. And they slightly admitted it's a bit of a blind spot. We explored other issues, environmental issues, clean energy issues, and we were pushing them for greater disclosure. It's something that we try and do ourselves, is try and be more transparent, so we ask our companies to do the same. We often get asked, what is the impact of engagement? Well, funnily enough, within a month of that meeting, they issued a press release that said that they were forming their first ESG committee, which was nice. And we certainly can't take full credit for that, but we hope that our involvement, our pressing them on these issues, has made a contribution to this company looking at ESG issues more closely and thinking we need to accelerate. And
just with that, there's an awful lot of sort of momentum going into these sort of ESG and environmental issues, particularly from investors, from the industry itself, and from governments. Are you seeing this continuing to improve? What are the sort of the dynamics around that part of the industry?
Well, it's an enormous focus now, and I think it partly explains the rise of interest in this type of fund, a responsible and sustainable fund. I think the penny has well and truly dropped pretty much all around the world that climate change is a real and present danger to livelihoods and the world economy, and it is very much in question as to how well prepared people and companies are to deal with these issues. One of my colleagues just recently returned from a clean technology environmental conference, and I have to say the mood was pretty gloomy because there's a lot of talk about trying to stick to a 1.5 degree increase type of world, but it feels like that's going to be very hard to achieve. We do need to already think about a 2 degree world. Now, that's not a good outcome. That's going to cause a lot of impacts. But I think there is now a sense that we have got to move on this. It's going to require different consumer choices, as well as leadership from leading companies around the world. But I think we need to think about how we prepare to live in a warmer world, as well as slow the pace of that global warming.
Well, Jamie, that's been really interesting. Thank you very much for joining us today. And for more information on the BMO Responsible Global Equity Funds, please visit FundCalibre.com.